where there's trees downs and interstates are blocked. If you have a weak link, we'll find it prior to you meeting the unit. But ultimately, it's one of the harshest environment that you can put a generator in is salt air.
And with hurricane season especially, it's coming up on us pretty quick. I know already getting phone calls from customers, from many different industries trying to reserve units from a rental side of things, individuals scheduling their PM services now, getting those scheduled out to be prepared for when the storms do hit, and other additional auxiliary services as well. So kind of that's speaking to all of that. I wanted to kind of first off get you to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your role here and with the company specifically, how long you've been with the company, and more so kind of what are you hearing right now in terms of activity within your region, kind of with your customer base right now in regards to hurricane season, what you're hearing, if anybody you're working with or have worked with recently, if they're preparing in certain ways that we want to highlight. But yeah, I wanted to kind of get you to start things off for us.
Yeah, man, appreciate the opportunity to sit down and have a conversation with you. So I'm Chad Roland, regional manager now for outside service in Florida, covering the Jacksonville branch and Pensacola branch. As far as hurricane preparedness, we've got customers that are on the schedule and they like the schedule. They like to do May, June. They're already on the schedule for that. They take care of their stuff and they're gone. And you have other customers that sort of prepare and want pricing for rentals and availability and sort of how it works. What topics do they need to cover to make sure that they have everything they need, when preparing for their emergency generator preparedness as well. So, yeah, man, I mean, the buzz is here. It'll get, if there's any named storms out there, it'll obviously get busier and, service calls will come in. But, really right now, everybody that is a current customer, they sort of already have their schedule in line. And if they want to get it scheduled prior to hurricane season, they've already sort of done that or doing it at this time.
Yeah, I know you were out. You were at the branch in 2024 when Milton and Helene hit. Was that right?
Correct.
Yeah, I know with Helene, we had I think it was nearly 6 million users from business and residential side, all impacted with power outages, just general power outages. And with Milton, I think we had over 3 million, same kind of thing. And I know with Milton, you guys were really hitting Florida on the east side quite a bit with that storm. I know I remember reading stories. I think we covered a few during the time where we were seeing businesses down for weeks at a time. And with Helene, I think it was down there. Some businesses in North Carolina specifically, they got hit horrible. They were down for months at a time. I know we sent some units out there. What are some of the, if you were to kind of make some judgments based on those specific events or even more recent storms? I was in the South for Katrina many years ago myself. And, I know myself, the direct impact, I've seen it firsthand. You see it every year pretty much. What are some of the, typical, typical challenges and issues our customers do face in a storm situation like a major hurricane where you have very heavy wind events, very heavy rain? What are some of the typical causes for individuals to, with units, backup systems in place or facilities? What are some of the reasons that these systems typically don't transfer over or just go down altogether when the power does go out? Can you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So some of these storms get so big that really it doesn't really matter where they hit in Florida. If a category 4 or 5 hits any coast of Florida, it really affects all of Florida because of just the residual. You'll have a storm that is as big as the Gulf of America, and then it could hit it at Tampa Bay, but it'll affect all the way up to Jacksonville and down to Miami with just high waters and flood zones and things like that. So, Florida as a whole, a lot of times the storm is bigger than the entire state. So no matter where it hits, really, it'll affect everybody sort of at one time over a couple day period. And then it's gone. So then you have to, if you did everything that you're supposed to do with your generator and you have it fueled and it's ready and serviced and load banked and tested and we signed off on it, gave you the seal of approval to move forward, you'll make it. So then, really it comes to how badly affected was the area. How long do you have to run on your fuel? Um, if you're in a very bad area to where there's trees downs and interstates are blocked, roads are blocked, and you can't move service vehicles through the area, that's when the challenges come um, to our customers just to simply get fuel, and that's the very um, it's most important. It's not most important, I guess, as far as the thing running, but it's a simple thing that even service vehicles for that matter, us trying to run the roads, and when a storm comes, everybody wants to go to the gas station and fill up, and
Yeah.
so you have gas stations running out of fuel, you've got roads that are blocked, and so some of these challenges, that it could go on for months, even. I think it was Matthew. No, it wasn't Matthew. One of the storms that it was Mexico Beach. In the past that there was cell towers and things out there that had rentals, and doing forced majors every 250 hours for almost a year because it wiped out the entire power grid. I mean, basically the coast, gone away. The water rushed in to Mexico Beach, and there was like two houses from what I remember left over. One, a doctor built like a really, really good structured house that was made to take a Cat 5 storm head on. And it did well. It stayed there. And then the house directly behind him stayed, and everything else, including every power pole, washed back out to the Gulf. So, it was, it just took the whole city with it. So there was stuff out there on cell towers and things like that, trailer units running for damn near a year. And so then it becomes, we got to get over there and service it. You got to keep it serviced. You got to keep it fueled. And so it could go on and on, um, with problems for quite a long time, depending on the impact of the storm and how big it is.
Yeah, no, definitely. Major events like that definitely wreak havoc. Not just on it, definitely impacts the entire Gulf Coast. I believe it doesn't matter if you got any rain from a storm specifically. The impacts are almost like it's trickle down. Almost it spreads quite rapidly, and it lasts. The impacts can last quite a while. One of the things I've noticed, like at least like working in this space from my perspective for the past few years, is there's almost like this three-prong approach in terms of generator preparation for hurricane season. I've always seen it as like you have before the storm, like you just mentioned, you want to be prepared as much as possible. Then you have during the storm, which is when activity gets very hot, very fast, demand increases significantly. And then after the storm, depending on the severity of it, like the storm you just mentioned and the recent storms that hit you guys the past couple of years, then you have to deal with the after effects, with not only like you just said, refueling, servicing, keeping the rentals up for those customers, but also long term down the line when the next storm comes, you need to think about what's going to happen next and how you can be better prepared. Can you kind of talk about? I'm very curious to see, like, the Florida side of things, specifically around the Gulf region. How do you guys typically handle demand when it does influx significantly, when a storm is hitting the region, and you do have those customers? What are some of the things that our team's doing? What are you guys doing out there to ensure that that the customer is getting the support, the service they need, and also that we're kind of mitigating as many of the annuities as possible? I know we can't control the weather and everything, but yeah, can you kind of speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, I mean, really, it just becomes all hands on deck and use all the tools that you have, all the trucks, all the folks, and try to manage it correctly. You put, obviously some customers take priority over others, just life safety stuff, and anybody that has life critical machines or hospitals, nursing homes, anything with life safety that you try to get to them guys first, and then go down the line from there. But it it becomes a struggle really because everybody, you'll have a service call or two, maybe a day or a week, and you might have a rental, once a week or something during normal season, and then when a storm's coming, it's named, and we go into a state of emergency. People they sort of freak out a little bit, and so you got all the rentals are off the yard, they're gone. Service calls go from normal to you might have say a 10-man crew, for instance, and then now you need a 100-man crew, and so sometimes it's hard to um really gear up for that stuff too. You just really got to use all hands on deck, and anybody that you can use. In the past, I've had, you know, friends and even my dad for that matter haul stuff for us. Anybody that's got a dually and willing to hook up to a rental and go, you pay them to ride. And so you think out of the box and sort of bring all your tools to the table and try to help your customers out.
Definitely, no. Definitely being proactive is the key here. I think with especially with weather-related events and power outages. So, be as proactive as possible. All sounds great. I want to kind of shift the focus just slightly to the environments in the Gulf, around the Gulf region, in the East Coast as well as West Coast, and face quite significant elements outside of weather. So you deal with like things like corrosion, for instance. Can you kind of speak a little bit about the impacts on that corrosion or the salt air? Very humid environment, salt corrosion, things like that. How these are pieces that a lot of our customers, a lot of end users who don't really operate their generators regularly, or maybe are not in front of the equipment every single day or frequently. They don't really think about these little bitty things that can cause major major challenges and issues. When the generator doesn't need to kick on. Can you speak a little bit about that specifically, and some of the things you and your team in Florida have seen possibly out in the field in the past, and how these customers can get better, more aware, I guess is the right word, more aware of being prepared for, like I said, proactive with for the next storm?
Yeah, yeah. So the coastline specifically, if you're, you can get away from that corrosion element pretty fast. So it's directly to the coast. If you're on, the coast, a mile or closer to the coast, all the way around the coast of Florida, you have that salt air that is highly corrosive, and it takes a toll on everything, not just generators. Any kind of equipment that the customer has, um, cars included, handrails, whatever the case may be, it compromises them. So, the biggest thing is to make sure that the customers are keeping up, with us, and keeping their services. Sometimes we ask them to be a little bit more, rather than just annual service, let's do quarterly service, or either monthly service, to make sure that this thing is watched. And you can try to clean it, you can try to pressure wash it, you can paint it, but ultimately there's really no 100% fix for the decay of metal. We can sell them stainless steel stuff. You can, try to get around lengthening the life of the machine, but ultimately it's one of the harshest environment that you can put a generator in is salt air. So, and just looking at it more, maintaining it, getting us around it, getting a professional's eyes on it is always recommended. And it just becomes a time to where at this, we have to make a judgment call as a generator source, and the customer included, to say, hey, this thing now is no longer dependable. We need to remove it and replace it with a new one. I've had conversations with customers that say, hey, listen, why has this generator only lasted 10 years? And we're sitting there talking, and you can feel the ocean air across your face from the waves crashing. You can hear the waves, and they just don't understand why the machine doesn't last as long as it should. And I say, well, listen, man, I mean, you got it, salt air actively just landing on it all day long. And, I ask them a lot of times, I've had this specific conversation with a customer, like, listen, how often do you replace your AC units? And they say, well, every 5 years. And I said, well, I mean, this is no different. It's, it's a machine just like everything else. So, the generator lasted 5 years longer than your AC. I mean, I feel like you're doing good. So it's,
Yeah, and I guess like speaking to all that too, how's the fuel? I know fuel. I don't say it's a vulnerability, but with corrosion and the humidity and everything, how is fuel impacted by this? Specifically with diesel, I know diesel is a very go-to choice within your region. How is fuel impacted by all this as well?
well, fuel starts with, the government allows the fuel providers to put 10% of biofuel in it, which creates a problem right from the time you put it in the tank. So, before, and then even the engines now. So you have a few things that work together. where fuel becomes a problem. So back in the old days, in the old engines, you could put anything in the tank and they would run off of them and they would eat trash and that kind of thing. And so now the diesel technology has gotten to where we're running, 200,000 PSI through a pinhole, and it doesn't accept trash. It doesn't accept anything in the tank. And so, it can ruin injection pumps, injectors, things like that by letting any kind of fuel in. So going back to the fuel, you start with that 10% biofuel, so it's already growing stuff in it essentially from new. And so really keeping additives in it, taking fuel samples every time we service at least once a year, send it off. If you need to get it filtered, we provide filtering services, polishing, and just pulling samples. So, humidity, it puts water in the fuel. You get water in the fuel naturally. Just the tanks sweating, the lower the level you keep them, the more opportunity you have for sweating inside the tank, humidity involved, and more water gets in it. So keeping them full is important. Just like anything else, if you have a boat, essentially it works the same. Keep them full, try not to keep them sweating. Humidity in Florida, it'll get, water in the fuel, and then you have an engine that, obviously doesn't run on water. So if you get too much water, it's picking up water, not fuel, and then it doesn't run. So yeah, I mean, fuel is the main source of providing the power. That's what the prime mover runs on, and it's uber important that you maintain that fuel just like you maintain the generator.
Perfect. No, yeah, fuel is probably the most important component, like you just said. Definitely something to always think about and keep in mind in the back of your head, especially if you're an operator with a system already in place in your facility. So, let's shift a little bit to the getting ready for hurricane season. So, a lot of users, people listening right now, for instance, probably either have a system in place, or they're probably looking at a system, or they don't have a system in place. What are some of the things that I know we have a checklist on the Generator Source website that anyone can access for to get a general consensus of your regular checks you want to do weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual. But looking at the load bank piece specifically, load banking obviously is we're basically stress testing the equipment at the scale it's going to be operating in. Can you kind of speak a little bit about how load banking is super critical for users in Florida, around the Gulf, East Coast region, but how this is even more critically important with hurricane season in mind and vastly approaching, and the differences between the types of load banks that are typically available from a provider like us, and how these tests ensure that the equipment is going to operate fully.
Yeah, so just like you said, it's a stress test. It does a few things. So you get a sense of, you can take a unit, run it between 80 to 100%, and you have now the technician evaluate the machine as it's to its full potential, making sure that it's not going to overheat, create any leaks. It's going to run for the 2 or 4 hour test is typically what we do, and you'll bring out the fail at that point. So if it has a weak link, the conversation I have with the technician, or the customer rather, is that if you have a weak link, we'll find it prior to you needing the unit. So it's important to do a load test. We recommend once a year, just to do that stress test and find the weak link in the unit, and any recommendations we can get them fixed before the season comes. And also, if it's a diesel unit, and these things typically run, a lot of times the unit, even if it does a transfer while exercising, it doesn't have a whole lot of load on it. So you're not getting to that threshold of being able to clean the engine up. And what I mean by that, they call it a term of wet stacking or slobbering, to where you have the rings essentially suck up on the pistons because of no load. I call it, sort of analogy, is having grandpa drive your truck all day long, and then you get in it, and he drives it for a year that way, and you get in it and floor it, and it blows a bunch of black smoke out, and it cleans it up, blowing all the carbon out of the engine. So that's essentially what a load bank does to a diesel. And if you run a diesel basically at idle, is what a generator does with no load. It's just sitting there idling with no load on it. It'll start blowing by oil. So it's consuming oil. It's pushing oil through the cylinders out the exhaust system, and then it creates, smoke, a mess, because a lot of times it just creates leaks, and now you've got oil, pushing out of the exhaust, and it can really make a mess if it's not handled. So, stress test for all generators to make sure that they're ready in their prime time and they've handled the 100% load and capability of it for hours on end. And then, diesels are even worse. You got to correct that problem of having to load exercise them once a week, for the year that it's there without us doing a load test on it. So.
Oh no, that's all great. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess like in terms of that, if a customer or user should say, does let's say they have a system in place, it runs perfectly, but the hurricane unfortunately floods the area, and then the unit becomes completely unsafe. They have to replace it. From the insurance perspective side of things, I guess I'm kind of curious, how critical is regular service, maintenance, load banking? Is any of that relevant at all to be able to recapture, or reinstall a new unit and get, the cover the insurance side of this discussion? I guess, is there any impacts there at all that you know of?
I I don't know that the insurance company comes back. If it's a total loss because of a storm, I don't know that they come back and look at maintenance records.
Okay.
I have had insurance companies call us for different things. If um, I can't remember exactly now what they were all about. I mean, we've had instances where trucks ran off the side of the road and totaled out generators and,
Yeah.
all kinds of different things. But as far as the storm and sort of totaling out a generator, I'm not real sure if they go back and look at the maintenance records. I mean, you know, touching back on the fuel stuff, if you're a life safety type unit, you have over 550 gallons, you've got to do fuel tank tests. That's state mandated. You've got to do load bank tests on life safety stuff. That's state mandated. That's not something that's really up to the customer to have a legal generator. So there's also recommendations, not recommendations, requirements from the state. If you have a life safety generator of any kind, that you have to do a certain amount of maintenance on that machine.
Yeah. Okay, no, that definitely makes sense. I know, like life safety, I know healthcare is a big industry out in Florida, just in general, and that's definitely a component that is very essential for those the facilities to stay up in operations during any kind of event, especially a hurricane. So, perfect. I guess kind of looking at the closing part of this discussion here. What are some things that you could personally recommend? Again, users listening to us right now, and people reading, our articles about this topic online. Do you have any suggestions for action items for these listeners and viewers for things they can go do maybe today or this week or the next month or so? Visual checks, anything like that. Obviously, want to get if you're local to a generator source branch, obviously reach out to one of our team to get service scheduled. But what are some tips and recommendations you would recommend to individuals kind of to do today to ensure guess that first layer of assurance with their equipment on site?
Yeah, so if you're at a facility that has maybe a maintenance facility director or somebody like that can go out or assign somebody to just essentially kick the tires, maybe once a week, just go look at the machine, make sure that it's not an alarm. Maybe teach them. We can do training events to where, we can have a technician show up and train the maintenance guys on how to safely run the machine. And if they want to run it and do some really, small checks on their end to give them a comfort zone weekly, and then they can get us involved if it gets, higher than that. Obviously, the more rotation and the more you have the generator source out, a professional technician in front of it, the better off that it's going to be when it comes to prime time and running, keeping up on your maintenance, making sure the fuel is full. Um, just kicking the tires, keeping up on the maintenance. I always tell the technician to go in front of the machine. And if you can't assure that customer that this thing is going to run for, weeks at a time at full tilt, because if this particular part looks okay, it's going to be fine. And if you can't guarantee that it's going to last, for this thing to run for weeks while the storm has already passed and it's going to run without fail. If there's any concern whatsoever, if it's 1%, let's write it up and let the customer know and let them make the decision whether they want to wait or go ahead and fix it. So I know that there's different levels of I guess you got life safety, obviously, I would say, and is probably number one important. And then, data centers and things like that, they come in and they lose a lot of money if they lose power and that kind of stuff. So, life, I would say that there's a lot of facilities that we have life safety that are on monthly, monthly checks and, um, just kicking the tires, getting around it, making sure that it's going to run and doing all your service. You can compare it to like your car. Everybody that doesn't really know generators too well, but if you can't depend on your car, you got a brand new car and you want to drive it to California, or if you want to get on Daytona Speedway and run it for 24 hours, like a 24-hour Rolex race, and beat it up just as bad as you can for 24 hours. If you don't think it's going to last, what car are you going to bring to the racetrack? Is it going to be the brand new car that's going to make it that 24 hours, or is it going to be the old Volkswagen in the back that hasn't ran in a couple of years? Which one are you going to bring to make sure that it runs that 24-hour period or that week period or whatever? And so a lot of people can compare themselves to a car and what the maintenance is. It's the same with a generator. You just got to make sure that it's like new. We're putting new stuff on it, and it's gonna, it's gonna finish the race.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, downtime is never a good thing with energy in the world we're living in today. So, perfect. I kind of have really just one more question for you for today. It's kind of more of a personal question I wanted to ask, but in your opinion, why is hurricane season preparation within the generation space specifically for the Gulf Coast? Why is that significantly different from other parts of the country? It was kind of just again more personal perspective here.
I guess the level of impact. I mean, the storms get so big, and like I said, really, if you get a Cat 4 or 5 storm that comes through, it affects, not where it hits, and it affects the entire state. You might not get 160 mile an hour or 170 mile an hour winds, but you could get gusts of 60 and 70, 80 mile an hour, 300 miles from where the storm hit. Which takes basically it consumes the entire state no matter where it hits. It's going to affect at least your location somehow. And, I guess I guess the coastline, really, I would say Florida is probably number one for landing hurricanes. That it happens where the rest of the country, obviously over there in Colorado, you won't get hurricanes at all. I don't know if that ever happens. So, you have other things like snow to worry about. And, that's where the hurricane capital of the world. And I call that the same for generators. It's the generator capital of the world too. It's just generators everywhere. So, yeah, man.
Yeah, or the demand is increasing, supply is, I guess, increasing too. We could say that, but the demand's increasing. People are definitely becoming more aware, a lot of more self awareness, I think, around energy resiliency for not only their businesses but their homes too. I mean, we're all impacted by this stuff when it does happen, unfortunately. So, perfect. Well, Chad, you have anything else you'd like to contribute, add to the conversation at all?
Oh no, man. I think we covered most of it.
Perfect. Yeah. I want to say thank you for your time today. A lot of really great insight. You gave me some really great context, and our audience a lot of great context to just anticipate and be a little bit more prepared, hopefully, for when that next storm does hit. And I think we're going to definitely be talking with you again in the next episode or so as the hurricane season kind of kicks off and we move into the middle of it. I know this year we're expecting either one way or another with more storms or less storms than usual, so we'll just kind of keep an eye out, but obviously everybody is listening with us here today, reach out to Chad, Florida team, if you are in their region, if you need any kind of generator service, support, sales, rental, anything like that. Chad is a fantastic guy, and he can definitely, him and his team are very knowledgeable and very skillful at doing what they do out there, and they can help you in any way they can. So Chad, again, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And thank you everyone else for listening as well.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Thanks, Chad. We'll talk again soon.